Okay, so what I'm going to do now is talk you through how I catch so many fish using ground bait products made by DNA. First of all, the key thing for me really is selecting the right ingredients, and the ingredients have to be of the highest quality in order for me to attract the fish to my hook bait, and that's normally what I use the ground bait for, is to try and get quick bites and try and get my hook bait to stand out in amongst those feeding fish. So first of all, really as my base, what I tend to use is the SLK stick mix, and this acts as a really good base for my ground bait mix. It's very pungent, it's very high in protein, so it attracts the fish very well, but it also binds really well, and that's very important for what I actually use the ground bait for, which I'm going to show you later. Another key ingredient for me with regards to my ground bait mix is probably my favourite product from DNA, and that's the krill meal. This is 100% pure krill meal mix, and it is just amazing for attracting fish. It's rich in protein, again extremely smelly, and if you look at the colour, it's this beautiful orange colour, and it tends to give the method feeder mix or the stick mix an actual different look and different texture to it. And then finally, to finish off the mix, what I like to do is also add some pellets. The good thing about adding pellets is, again, it makes the mix a little bit stickier, so if you're using it with method feeders at long range like I like to, it binds the ground bait really well to the feeder, and it means I can chuck the feeder over 100 yards absolutely no problem. So they're the ingredients I use, and I also tend to use a little bit of tuna oil as well, just to sort of spice the mix up a little bit. I either use this to improve the flavour of the mix, or I also use it to grease up the method feeder mould, which I'm going to show you later. So to make the mix, quite simply, the first thing I do is add the dry powdered ingredients. So first of all, the SLK stick mix. So, and what I like to do with the ground bait mix, and the mistake that people commonly make, is try to make too much of it. The smaller amount of ground bait mix you make, the more control you have over the consistency and how it actually turns out. And when I first started using ground bait as a competitor, many years ago now, I used to try and make lots and lots of it in one go, and that used to take a long time, and the ground bait used to lose the texture that I wanted from it. So now I tend to make a lot less, maybe a kilo in one go. So my base for the mix is approximately half and half SLK stick mix, and then half the krill meal. So I'm taking what is a relatively basic ground bait and turning it into something special with this krill meal. And it's really important that you don't mix the pellets at this point. The pellets have to be added once you're happy that the powdered ingredients are actually quite moist and ready for the pellets to be added. So I'm just mixing this together thoroughly at the moment, making sure there's no lumpy bits or anything like that within the mix. And you can see instantly the colour, the effect that krill powder's had on that mix. It turns it a really nice orange. It's a really natural, bright colour, and I do like to use bright colours in my fishing, but tend to try and stick towards the more natural side. So for me, that krill meal has given me an edge instantly, and I haven't even started putting water in the ground bait yet. So once you've got a dry mix of the two ingredients, you can then start adding water, and you can add it quite aggressively. The most important thing is you spread the moisture around consistently within the mix. So I'll take quite a lot of water, splash it about in the mix, and then start moving it about quite quickly to try and spread that moisture out. And you can see that I'm actually using a large bucket with a very large bottom, so that means I can move the ground bait round very quickly, making sure the water is spread evenly amongst the mix. And any match angler or any carp angler who uses ground bait will tell you that one of the most important things is to get a huge amount of air in the mix, because that makes it light and fluffy, and it means that the ground bait will act or react quicker once it's added to the fishing scenario, to the water. So you can see here straight away you see a difference in the mix, and it already looks slightly damp, but what you need to do is keep working it, and it can take up to 10 or 15 minutes to get the right amount of moisture in the mix. So pretty much in any situation where I'm using the ground bait, as soon as I turn up to my swim, the first thing I do is crack open my ground bait and I start adding moisture to it, because I know it's going to take 10, 15, maybe even 20 minutes to come perfect and good. And already you can see that the quality of the ingredients I'm using allow me to make a really light, fluffy ground bait mix, and that's not even ready yet. But within a couple of minutes, I've turned that into something which is very usable and very attractive to the fish. And more importantly, when you're using this ground bait mix, what you need to do is keep checking it. Don't just assume that once it's mixed and once it's moist, it's going to stay that way, because within an hour it could be too dry and you may struggle to get the presentation or get the bait application that you want to get. So it is very, very important you look after your mix and you keep adjusting it accordingly, depending on how long the mix has been made for, or maybe how warm it is, what are the weather conditions like on that day, and just make sure you actually keep it at that perfect consistency. So at this point, what I will do is add my final ingredient, or my final solid ingredient, and that's the awesome crayfish mini mix. The reason why I love these pellets is I love using micro pellet anyway. I've used it for many years in my match fishing and my carp fishing. And the good thing about this mix is it contains lots of different size pellets, lots of different types of pellet, you know, right down from 1 mil coarse pellet up to higher level protein pellets, which are slightly bigger, which I assume would have been intended to maybe feed for trout. So yeah, nice mix of pellets, lots of different shapes and sizes and colours. So probably add around about 1/4 kilo of pellets to a kilo mix of ground bait. Simply pour them in and then just make sure they're mixed evenly amongst the ground bait. And then what will happen is those pellets will instantly try to take on water from the actual ground bait mix itself. So you'll find that you'll add the pellets, 5 minutes later you'll go back to the mix and it will seem bone dry again. So you need to be careful with that, and you do need to keep adding water to ensure the pellets take on enough water for the mix to stay moist. That is pretty much my finished mix. Now I could quite easily put that into a PVA bag now, or load a method feeder up with that mix, and it would work. It would work instantly, but what I do prefer to do is leave the mix for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, just allow everything to soak in the moisture, the pellets to soften up slightly, and what that means is that the ground bait will bind a lot better, and therefore I'll be able to cast a lot further, especially with the method feeder mix. And yeah, I mean, that is pretty much it, but I'm just going to give that 15 minutes to settle, and then I'll show you how I use it. Okay, so about 15 minutes has passed, and you can see here the ground bait's nicely matured, as I like to say. And all I'm going to do now is just make sure the moisture levels are right within the mix, just by adding a tiny bit more water. And as you add the water to the mix, you'll notice that you have to actually add less to actually get an effect. So what I mean by that is you have to be very careful the amount of water you actually add once the mix is starting to get maybe 20 or 30 minutes old. So very small amounts of water, just ensuring that that mix feels nice and moist throughout. And you can see the way I mix it, I actually add a huge amount of air to the mix. And you can see it becomes very, very light and fluffy. Even though these are relatively potentially quite heavy ingredients, they actually represent themselves quite light because I've actually added a lot of air to the mix, and that allows it to become really fluffy. So how I use this mix, I do use it in a lot of my angling, and I do apply it to a lot of different scenarios, whether I'm fishing for big fish, or I'm fishing in a competition, or I'm even fishing for small carp in a action-packed match. So the main way I use this ground bait, and the way that I want to show you today, is with a method feeder, and it's actually a flatbed method feeder designed by Fox, and it's from the Matrix range. And these feeders, some will argue, they're actually designed for use maybe on a quiver tip, but I actually use these in my everyday carp angling, regardless of what fish I'm fishing for. I think they're an excellent rig for a number of reasons. And these feeders, I mean, this one's 60 gram, so you know it's well over 2 ounces, and they can be cast a huge range if they're set up properly and if the mix is correct. With regards to hook baits, I do try and keep it simple, and these two, to be honest, do me 95% of my bites. PB 10 mils and the Milky Malts 10 mils as well. Absolutely awesome hook baits. If someone said to me I could only use one hook bait for the rest of my life, this would be the one. So going back to the feeder, so very, very simple setup, and one of the key parts of this really is that you load it correctly, which is what I'm going to show you now. So with every single type of feeder, you should get a mould. I recommend you use the moulds because it keeps the feeder at a consistent shape and weight, so therefore your casting accuracy can be improved. You know, and we use these feeders over 120 yards out in some cases, and you need it to be a uniform shape so it flies beautiful and obviously hits the spot every time. But one of the things people do struggle with with regards to this type of ground bait mix is it's sticking in the mould, and the way I get around that is by using another product, which is tuna oil. And not only does this stop the method feeder mix actually sticking to the mould, it also improves the attractability of the mix as well by adding a layer of oil to the outside of the feeder. So very easy to apply. Just open up the tuna oil there, put it onto a bit of cloth, just quite a bit of it, and put the oil to one side, and then just simply add that oil to the inside of the mould itself just by rubbing it in. And just by doing that, that stops any problems with the method feeder mix actually sticking or actually having problems with removing the ground bait from the mould itself. Again, before I actually do load the feeder, I'll just check the consistency of it to make sure it's right. Add a tiny bit more water if I need to. So you take the rig itself, making sure the hook length is laying through the centre of the feeder, and the hook length or the hook bait is the first thing that actually goes into the mould. And you place that inside the mould, making sure it's central. Take some ground bait and you cover up the hook length with the ground bait itself, fill in the whole cavity within the mould. And then you take your feeder, making sure that you put it back on the actual hook length, squash it down nice and tight, give it a squeeze, and out comes the loaded feeder. And you can see there, that is absolutely perfect and will be every single time you use that type of rig. And to be honest, you know, casting one of those is simply like casting a 3.5 ounce lead. The beauty of it is the rig is never going to tangle. You know, a lot of the times when we're fishing tight to islands, we'll be clipping trees with these and they'll be plopping in. No problems at all. That hook is completely safe, completely protected by the ground bait, and it means you get perfect presentation every time.